Good morning, everyone. This is Jason Dean coming live at you for another Film Fanatic show. So today is a special show. So first off, happy Halloween. Today is officially Halloween, the best holiday in the universe, as far as I'm concerned. I love Halloween. It's my favorite holiday. I uh, I don't really do anything different per se on Halloween. In years past, I always, you know, try to do something fun on Halloween or go out the weekend of Halloween, do something fun, go to a party or go see some music. I went to a couple events over the weekend, Friday and Saturday, that were Halloween themed. So that was very cool. The actual Halloween day itself, it's always funny because there there aren't a whole lot of things going on. It's always, well, Halloween is like a mass kind of consumer driven holiday now, or it has been, second only to Christmas, I believe, as far as people buying stuff and decorations and all these things. But I don't know. It's it's always on the actual date or the day of or night of Halloween. I always find it's kind of anticlimactic because typically, like, bars and places that do things, they do everything the weekend before, and Halloween is always usually, it always falls on a Monday or Tuesday night or during the week. So, which is not like your typical bar night. So traditionally, places always do big events that Saturday or that Friday. But on actual Halloween, there's not really all them. There's not actually really anything going on. There are a few things going on, but it's actually pretty low key, and I've always thought that was kind of lame. But it is what it is. But still, typically, again, I don't really change my habits around Halloween. Like, I don't really decorate my house for Halloween. I don't really change my habits as far as like the movies that I watch to kind of put me in a certain state of mind, like a Halloween state of mind. The reason is because my house is kind of decorated in kind of a Halloween aesthetic year round. So it looks like Halloween. Um, it's decorated in that vein year round. So I have, you know, those kinds of things anyway. I have masks set up and skulls and things, and I that's just a year round thing that I have. And as far as my taste, as far as what I watch or what I crave, typically people will, like, want to watch horror movies on Halloween or like that month of October. And for me, it's like I watch horror movies all the time, pretty much every day in some form, in some capacity. So it's not any different for me as far as that goes. It's pretty funny. It's kind of just a normal day for me. And then, some people go all out and, do the Halloween thing to, where they get all decked out. They do all kinds of decorations. But for me, it's not just a holiday. It's just kind of a state of mind, and it's just kind of naturally how I just feel natural in that kind of habitat or that environment. So it's pretty funny. So we'll see what happens. Maybe there'll be something going on tonight. I haven't had made didn't really make any plans per se tonight. So we'll see. Some tentative things, but nothing set in stone. But it'd be fun to do something. I do have a tradition of the one tradition I do have is that I always watch Halloween on Halloween. That's one tradition I always have, and that's one thing that it's probably a little bit different maybe, but I just recently bought Halloween on Blu-ray 4K a couple weeks ago, and I never have seen it on Blu-ray. Never even and I have only owned Halloween, the original by John Carpenter, on DVD. It's really funny. So I finally got a copy of it, and I did watch it. I think I've watched it once, but tonight I'm gonna try to get through as many Halloween movies as I can. I have the first one, the second one, the Season of the Witch, third one, and Halloween Ends. I have those on Blu-ray. The trying to think. I don't own. Yeah, it's funny. I don't own any of the other Halloween movies on Blu-ray, or I don't think I even own them on DVD. There are some other films in the franchise that I really like and that I love, actually. H2O being one is a really great one, and I actually do like, and I didn't like them at first, but they've really grown on me. The Rob Zombie movies, I actually really like those, especially the second one. The second one is kind of badass. I don't own those though, which is kind of weird. I should get those at some point. And H2O, like I said, that one I think is a really awesome movie, and it's so good that I think it's its own like the quality of that film is so good that I feel like it's a standalone film. Like you could just watch that cold. It's really good, and it's real fresh. It feels real contemporary, and it is just a really fun movie. It's very well crafted for what it is. So I'll do that. That will be one thing that will definitely happen tonight. Is I will watch Halloween and then try to watch Halloween 2 depending on the time of the night and how tired I am or whatever. So that will be a given, and I'll probably eat some candy. So that's pretty exciting. But anyway, today's show is a little bit different. I'm going to just basically talk about formal slash informal, probably more on the informal list because there's not any real particular order. There are a couple that I would say are definitely at the very very top, but everything else is kind of interchangeable, and it's kind of all over the place. And I attribute that to because there's so many movies in the horror genre that I love, and also I feel like there are definitely more other certain films in the horror genre that definitely have a little bit more of what's the best way to describe it, an atmosphere, or that can kind of put you in a certain mindset, like Halloween, for instance, the atmosphere. So I recently saw a woman that I am friends with on Facebook had put up a list of her like top 10 or top 20 horror films that she likes to watch on Halloween. And I haven't really done that. I'm not really interested in doing that on this channel. Just because it gets done all the time, and I feel like it's been done so many times that it's a little bit like, uh, I don't know. It doesn't have. It's not as exciting because so many people do it all the time. As far when it comes to people coming up with people who have YouTube channels or whatnot, but people who talk about very formal, specific lists of films. I like it when a person can kind of describe or talk about somewhat off the cuff about films that they really love, or if they go out and they go on this, they purchase a whole bunch of horror movies and they talk about them and they just kind of run through them and give you a general synopsis. I like those kinds of shows just because they're a little bit more loose, and it's hard to say what the definitive movies are for you. But that being said, there are movies that are definitely that in that I hold in that regard. But today this woman had talked about her like, I think it was like 20 movies, and it was on Facebook, and a woman had talked about her top like 20 movies that she typically watches on Halloween. And I kind of get the sense that she probably doesn't watch them outside of this time of year. I could be wrong, but so that was the sense I got. The thing that was funny about her, she had some really cool movies, and a lot of her movies were very old school. A lot of movies were from like the 60s and 70s, which I'm all about. And that's the 70s being, like I've said many many times on this channel, the 70s being my favorite decade of all time. So, but it was funny because after she got done with the list, as she was typing, kind of this whole thing, at the conclusion of this post, she was kind of saying on how she doesn't like, and she was very general, very broad, very across the board. or not general, but very specific. And she basically said she doesn't like any new horror movies because she feels that they're too disturbing and kind of too offensive. And that's why she doesn't like newer horror films. She feels like the old school films, 60s and 70s, a lot of the black and white films were they had more a sense of style, and they relied more on characters and atmosphere, and not just gratuitous sex and violence. And so she basically trashed everything that's come out, say, around everything that's come out since like, the early 2000-ish period, or a little bit before, and basically said that nothing new that's out is good, and it's all like too disturbing and too offensive, and and it just irks me when people have that attitude, and it is what it is. But I'm just like, I just kind of feel when I come across that, on one hand it fires me up, but then it pisses me off, and then it also just, I find it so aggravating, and uh kind of shocked that people still believe these kinds of things, and that people are still walking around with this mindset about art all the time. But again, you can't, I'm not into changing people's minds or anything. I'm all about people being respectful of other things, and I just feel like that's another. And I've talked about it all. I just did a show about that, and I just feel like that kind of attitude is kind of part of that. So I was going to respond and put a list of, basically I was going to put a list at first. I was going to put a list of a bunch of like more modern films up until within the last 5 years or so. I was going to put a list of a bunch of horror films that I've seen, that some were very, very recent, and then some were again within the last 5 years. But I continue to believe, I kind of think that they are all like obviously modern horror films, and the films I feel are just amazing. So I was going to do a little list with that to start the post, and just basically try to highlight to this woman, well, okay, you don't like any new horror movies, and you say they're too weird, too disturbing, and that's fine, whatever. But there's so many great films that have come out. There's a lot of great directors out there, and I think you need to kind of respect that and not have your head in the sand. I wasn't going to say that or frame it that way, but I wanted to try to give an example of films in the modern era that I feel are really good. And then after that post, I was going to talk about kind of an informal list of movies that I love in the horror genre, that I feel are like my favorite horror films, and also films that I feel are geared towards a little bit more of the Halloween time of year. So, one of the movies I had named was Hereditary. That I think, but I didn't. I didn't end up posting on Facebook about this. I might. We'll see. But it takes a lot of time and effort, and it's a lot of the times it's for nothing. But some of the movies I've been thinking about, and also what I was going to post, horror movies in the genre, in the modern kind of contemporary genre, that I think are really, really great. I wanted to talk about them today, and then also talk about the informal list of my all around, all inclusive favorite horror films. So, like, I would say, like, as far as new horror films go, I think one of the best ones that's come out within the last 5 to 10 years, a little less, is Ari Aster's Hereditary. I think that movie is incredible. I think it is a movie that I've seen about a handful of times at this point. I don't own it, but it's gone. I it's a movie that I've seen, and each time I find myself enjoying it more and more. Ari Aster, I think, is an incredible director. He also directed Midsummer. I think that movie is also very super awesome in so many ways. But Hereditary, I think, is really great. It really has this old school '70s vibe. It That film reminds me of, even though it's its own thing, but it definitely has an Exorcist vibe for me, as far as, especially with the kind of the deepness of the horror and the family dynamic. And it does. I've always felt that that movie has like a '70s vibe. Um, the other movie I say is really really great is that Robert Eggers. He's also another figure right now in modern horror, which I think is, and I think he's one of the best guys working. He did his first film that he directed was The Witch, and I think that that is a really great movie. I do own that on Blu-ray. I have That movie has grown on me more and more over the years. I just love that movie to death. So, and he's also directed some other tremendous movies, The Lighthouse, which is such a great movie, and then also The Norseman, which came out late last year, which is another incredible movie. He's such a killer director, and from what I know, from what I gather, Robert Eggers is also, his next movie that he's going to be putting out, which I'm super excited about, is his adaptation of Nosferatu, which I can't wait. He's got an amazing track record. He's only got 3 films to his credit, but they're all just so good, and they're all definitely horror movies, but he blends lots of different styles into those films, into the horror genre. Uh, but I think The Witch is a tremendous movie. That's a movie also that's grown on me more and more. Another film that I think is really, really great, and I just saw that there's going to be a sequel, is a movie called It Follows. I think that movie is super cool, super original, super badass. Generally, I think it's generally a movie that is legitimately scary and super creepy. I really love that movie. I own that on Blu-ray. I think that's one of the better horror movies that's come out within the last 5 to 10 years. I think it's been out for quite a while, but I think it's within the 10-year radius. I could be wrong. But again, this is kind of an informal, just talk, where I'm just kind of talking about a loose list of newer films that I really like. The other movie I think is just really tremendous, and it's about 10 years now. James Wan's The Conjuring, the first Conjuring. I just watched that. I've always really liked that movie. I've always really loved that movie. I just watched that again last week, and I hadn't seen it actually in a few years. And I was like, this movie is fucking awesome. Like, it's so good. It totally, it's obviously the film and the story itself takes place in the '70s, but I feel like it's right out of like the '70s style playbook of filmmaking. It just has that vibe, and it's such a great movie. It's one of the best. I don't know. I kind of think, as far as since the Exorcist, since the original Exorcist has come out, I think it's the best like possession oriented or driven movie since then, and close to 50 years ago. But the first Conjuring, I just think, is amazing. It's so creepy, great atmosphere, great characters, everything, and I just think it's an amazing film. The other ones, not so much. I want to see them again. There's been other films that James Wan has done that are very good, but The Conjuring, I just feel like, is a home run. That's a modern horror masterpiece. And as far as like other films, like in more recent time, like really recent, I think a very recent film that came out that I think is just an awesome movie is a movie called The Black Phone with Ethan Hawke. It was directed by Scott Derrickson. Super awesome movie, super creepy. One of the best roles, I think, for Ethan Hawke, and I think one of the greatest kind of modern day monsters to a degree. The character he plays, the Grabber. The mask design is just incredible. The masks, I believe, are designed by Tom Savini, I think. just an amazing movie. And the other film that Scott Derrickson did was another movie also with Ethan Hawke called Sinister, which came out quite a few years ago. But I own Sinister on Blu-ray, and that movie is another movie I just think is totally awesome, legitimately scary and creepy. I remember when I first saw that movie, it legitimately got under my skin and kind of scared me. I love that movie, and I got that on Blu-ray a couple of years ago, and it's a really great addition. But Scott Derrickson also directed The Black Phone with Ethan Hawke, and that came out, I think it was last year or the year before. But super awesome movie. And again, another movie that very much has a really, it's very modern, obviously, but it's shot in this almost like period piece kind of a thing. It has a 70s vibe to it. It actually takes place in the 70s or the late 70s, early 80s. But it just has such a cool 70s vibe to it. Really great movie. Like, generally creepy, highly original, very suspenseful. Really, really good. Another movie that just recently came out that I think is probably the best horror movie I've seen in recent time as far as this year. A movie with Mia Goth, and that is called Infinity Pool. That movie is super trippy, super creepy, super dark. It was directed by Brandon Cronenberg, the son of David Cronenberg. The movie is super gory. It's totally fucked up and just amazing. Super cool movie, Infinity Pool. I've been recommending recommending that movie to people for a little while now, and I was blown away by that movie. I've only seen it once. I rented it on DVD, and it just came out. Well, it's been out for probably about 6 or 7 months. So I don't own it, but that is something I will definitely get. I'm a huge Mia Goth fan. I think she's the best around right now. And since I'm talking about Mia Goth, the other movies I think are just tremendous. I think one of the most important directors right now, if not the most important director in horror, is Ty West. Tremendous. I've been following his career for a long time actually, and I have quite a few of his movies, and I do like his films quite a bit. I think he's really great, and a really great figure in the world of independent filmmakers too. But he directed X a couple of years ago, and then the sequel, which came out last year, Pearl, both starring Mia Goth. Amazing movies. And there's going to be the third one's coming out next year called Maxine, which follows Mia Goth's character from the first movie. So it's a trilogy. But X, I think, is a masterpiece, a modern day masterpiece. It's a really great tribute to the old school kind of grindhouse movies from the 70s and 80s, and especially the slasher genre. It's amazing. It's got such atmosphere, amazing kills, great story, generally creepy. Such a great film. Such a great film. Big time influence for me when I watched that. When I first saw X, I thought, wow, this movie was really, really influenced by the original Texas Chainsaw Massacre. And I think, but yet it's its own thing. But tremendous movie. And then Pearl, which came out this last year, also starring Mia Goth, is just an incredible movie. Mia Goth is a firehouse in that movie. I think she should have gotten the Academy Award for it. Tremendous movie. And that's very, very recent. So there's a few movies that have come out, about 3 movies that have just come out within the last year or two that I just think are just, 2-degree instant horror classics. So good. So damn good. So that, that's like an informal list where I'm not really, thinking about it. I'm not writing a formal list down and doing research. These are just movies that I can kind of think off, that come to me when I just think of it, right away. And so that's what I wanted to try to do today, was just keep it loose. And I feel like, those movies really represent some newer films in the genre that I just think are tremendous. Another movie I would say is just really, really great that's come out the last few years is Babadook. An amazing movie. So damn good. Also, the Babadook, the director for the Babadook, which is, I think, that movie also was a movie that when I first saw it scared the shit out of me at times. The director of the Babadook, Jennifer Kent, is a tremendous, tremendous director. She also did a movie that came out a couple of years ago called The Nightingale, which is probably one of the more disturbing movies, or one of the most disturbing movies I've seen in recent time. It's a pretty fucked up movie, and it's super dark. It's not like a horror movie per se, but it definitely has horror elements. Or it, I mean, it's set in, and the Babadook has obviously the fantasy element. This film is kind of set in a reality of, well, more or less like real life horror, like real life monsters, and how vicious and cruel and ugly people are. But it's a tremendous movie. It's such a great movie, and I want to see it again. But it is brutal. There are scenes in that film that are pretty rapey, and it's pretty fucking disturbing. But it's an awesome movie. Jennifer Kent is awesome. She also did a movie, I think. There was a series that came out. The director Del Toro did I think it was like a horror anthology for, I don't know if it was Netflix or some streaming company. And I believe Jennifer Kent did one of the movies, one of the shorts for that series. And I heard it was really good, if not one of the best ones in the series. But she's badass. And Babadook is an amazing movie. I do own that on Blu-ray, and I've seen that a bunch of times. I think that movie is super awesome, highly creepy, and scary. That movie, I think, has a tremendous, when I did some research and checked out the special features, they did talk about it, which I thought was awesome. But that movie to me has a real big influence from The Shining. Super cool movie. So there's so many damn good movies, that have come out over the years in the more contemporary light that are, I think, just really, really around. And really viable, really important movies that should be watched and should be given some respect. And so those are like just a handful of newer films that I think are just really, really great. And then so when it comes to maybe a little bit more of a formal list of horror films, generally movies that I always watch, movies I always go to, movies that are my favorite in the genre. And there are things about these films that I'm going to talk about that I feel do kind of put me even more into kind of a Halloween state of mind. And I think my favorite horror movie of all time, I have to say, well, like I've said before, my favorite. Very, very hard to make lists. It's very, very hard to have your top 10 or top 20. I can't really do that. But there are certain films that are definitely number one for me. And like I've said before, my favorite film of all time is The Godfather. Hands down, without a doubt. I've seen that movie probably more than any other film in the entire universe. But I have to say, probably overall, my favorite horror film of all time is Stanley Kubrick's The Shining. I just can't get enough of that movie. Every time I see that movie, it creeps the shit out of me, and it just is. It's got so much rich detail to it. I get something out of it every time. The scares in the film always get me. It always is. It always takes me on that ride, and I have multiple copies of that on Blu-ray, and DVD. It's my favorite Stanley Kubrick movie. Stanley Kubrick is my favorite director of all time, and I think overall, all around, it is my favorite horror film of all time. Just amazing. And I'd have to say another one easily would be Ridley Scott's Alien, tremendous, just a masterpiece. I own numerous editions of that on Blu-ray and DVD. Since I'm saying Alien, I also think Aliens, directed by James Cameron, is right up there too. I just think that movie is just a masterpiece. Also, one of the greatest sequels, if not the greatest sequel in the history of films. So good, so damn good. Um, I think other movies that are up there is William Friedkin's The Exorcist. Obviously, I think that movie is an unparalleled masterpiece. Even by today's standards, that movie is so uh, twisted and really pushes the envelope. I honestly think that movie probably could not be made today in a lot of ways. There's been all of these kind of newer renderings of classic films, like RoboCop. There is a new Exorcist out, which I haven't seen, and I don't know if I'm going to see it, but and I've seen, there's been a whole slew of other possession films, and there are certain scenes in the original Exorcist that I feel like they could not make that today. They could not make that today. One, I think the RoboCop remake was an example of that. The original is such a damn good movie, and it's so brutal and so over the top. And the new one is so like sanitized and kind of censored. It has moments to it that are actually pretty good, but it's so like pale in comparison. And to think what William Friedkin was able to do with The Exorcist back then, I think now it's still a shocking movie and just incredible, amazing movie. Um, the original Texas Chainsaw Massacre, without a doubt, is one of my favorites. Um, amazing film. One of my definitely in my top five or top three or top four. Toby Hooper, when he unleashed that movie onto the world, it changed cinema forever. One of the most gut wrenching movies ever made. It's so raw, and again, it's a movie that has this weird reputation where a lot of people say, "Oh, it's so gory and graphic," but it's actually not. It's actually not very gory at all. It's all psychological, and I think that's the power of that movie. That's part of the mystique of that movie, and it's really a great example of what you don't see is actually a little bit more terrifying. Uh, Amazing. I can't say enough good things about the Texas Chainsaw Massacre, and that movie is such an inspiration for me. Or, in regards to all of these movies I've mentioned too, all have a tremendous influence in very specific ways on my band Quantum. Whether it's like kind of the aesthetic design, the use of masks, the imagery, uh, that is a big part of it. But then even the music of these films, the even the direction itself, the pacing, just really everything. Yeah, I just think it's an amazing movie. I think, and another movie I think is one of the greatest is, and it has to be on the top of the list. John Carpenter's Halloween. You know that too. That's another movie I've seen so many times I cannot even fathom to try to figure out how many times I've actually seen it. Masterpiece, masterpiece. And I just bought that on Blu-ray. Amazing. Another film, probably overall the best movie John Carpenter's ever done, is The Thing. Incredible, masterpiece, amazing film. I need to upgrade that on DVD or Blu-ray. I don't have it on Blu-ray, which is ridiculous. Such a freaking great movie. Such an amazing movie. And then other movies that I think are just so amazing. My favorite Italian director, Lucio Fulci. I would have to say my favorite film of his entire career is The House by the Cemetery. That movie to me is like the epitome of horror. I love that movie so much. It's such a gore-soaked classic. It's got some of the greatest atmosphere ever put on screen. Lucio Fulci for me is the man. House by the Cemetery is so many great movies to his credit, but I think that movie is at a whole nother level. Another film of his that I just love so much is The Gates of Hell. Amazing, amazing movie. Another movie of his that I just think is also one of the best is The New York Ripper. So many great movies that I love of his. him being my favorite um, Italian director. But those are just some titles, and I know I'm leaving some out. But New York Ripper, just amazing. Probably the most uh, sleaziest, probably the sleaziest exploitation movie ever made in the horror genre. Amazing, but just so damn good. Again, and then my all time favorite, without a doubt, my all time favorite horror exploitation movie of all time is Tourist Trap, starring Chuck Connors. That movie, which was definitely inspired by and kind of ripped off things from Texas Chainsaw Massacre. But that movie is just such a masterpiece. It's so ridiculous and so terrible and so weird and so disturbing. It's got so many things going on in it. And I have that on DVD. I have a few copies of it on DVD, and I got a really great edition a couple of years ago on Blu-ray. Tourist Trap with Chuck Connors is my favorite, hands down, my favorite horror exploitation movie of all time. It's the epitome of horror, just grimy, low budget horror, and where it's just so bad and it's so good at the same time. Such a masterpiece. I've been really happy to see that movie has been getting more and more popularity over the years because it really deserves it. Another film would be the Canadian exploitation movie My Bloody Valentine. I think that movie is just a masterpiece. One of the greatest slasher movies of all time. Oh god, just so many amazing things about that. Another movie I would have to say is right up there, which is my favorite slasher movie of all time, is Bill Luswig's Maniac. I've talked a lot about that movie. That's without a doubt in there, in this like kind of informal list. Although Maniac is definitely my favorite slasher film of all time. Obviously, the Friday the 13th franchise, amazing, amazing, amazing. Did a big series of shows where I covered all of the movies in that franchise a while back. Yeah, just such a great movie. And then also one of my other favorite exploitation directors, Herschel Gordon Lewis. He's the man. I have to say, Blood Feast is my favorite film of his, and that movie is just so fucking awful and so amazing at the same time. And it's so great. It's so weird and it's trippy and it's just great. It's an amazing movie for what it's worth. I'm a huge Herschel Gordon Lewis fan, and I own most of his films now on Blu-ray, which are some of my favorite Blu-rays. But Blood Feast is probably my favorite. I just think that movie is a masterpiece, a masterpiece. Another movie I think is really an amazing film. One of the most like satanic and erotic films I've ever seen. I would have to say is Satan's Blood, which is a Spanish horror exploitation movie that came out in the 70s, late 70s, early 80s. Just an amazing film. Just so incredibly sleazy and so weird, but just so satisfying. And it's a really great horror film. Definitely was influenced by Rosemary's Baby, but it's like way more sleazy, way more disturbing. Even though Roman Polanski's Rosemary's Baby is like a masterpiece, but Satan's Blood is just kind of a fucked up movie. So freaking sleazy. There's orgy scenes in it, and it's just amazing. And I love that movie to death. I was so psyched when I bought that on Blu-ray, and I had never seen it before. Another movie, which is also another Spanish movie, which is one of the more disturbing movies I've ever seen. It also has a very satanic kind of thing. Is Satanico Pandemonium, which is another Spanish movie. I love that movie to death. Kind of obsessed with that movie. Again, that movie is highly erotic, really disturbing, kind of a psychosexual thing, but great atmosphere and just an amazing horror movie. I love that movie to death. And again, so this is like just me kind of generally talking about a bunch of movies that I really love. I'm leaving out probably like 2,000 movies, but I just wanted to keep this real loose and just kind of be off the cuff and just talk about movies that I can just think off the top of my head that I just instantly love and I can think about, and movies that I often have cravings to just watch. So, and again, it's an informal list, so it's always changing. I do see a lot of movies all the time, and a lot of movies I have never seen before. So, because of that, I try to keep this whole thing loose. That's why it's hard for me to say, oh, my top 20 or that kind of thing. So, yeah, again, check out any of these movies if you get a chance, if you haven't seen them. So damn good, new and old. And again, naturally, I always gravitate towards the older films, but there have been some really tremendous horror films that have come out in within the last few years. So this is Jason Dean, and wishing everyone a happy Halloween. Peace.